Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. Today, we're going to talk about planning for medical school, how I did it, what I would recommend, things I wouldn't do now that I know a little bit better. And the title of this webinar is Dream, Achieve, Inspire, and Not Early, Intentional, My Path to Medicine. And we're going to be planning with a purpose. So, yes, we are going to be early, but we're only doing that with intention. So everything is planned out. It's not going to be just being early for the sake of it. Because you can be early and then you can waste your time. And then being early will be for nothing. So let's get started. So first, a little about me. My name is Aya. I'm from Damascus, Syria. I love reading, ceramics, and overall just life. I graduated from Georgia State University at age 19 with a bachelor's in biology and a minor in psychology. I graduated with a 3.73 GPA because I love the study of life. I enjoy learning about Islam, advocating for my country, time in nature, reading, singing, ceramics, all the things. My love language is acts of service. I believe studying is a privilege because many are not able or cannot do so. Whether it's financial restrictions or otherwise, education is a privilege. Ideally, it wouldn't be, but it really is, and we should not take it for granted. And as it says in the Quran, whoever saves one life, it's as if he saved all of mankind. I moved here at age 6 due to a civil war in Syria, and in this presentation, I'm going to offer some tips and tricks as to how to make the logistics of education easier so you can focus on getting there fashionably on time. Maybe even earlier than I was able to. The way I was able to do it was by studying as much as I could, but mainly by going to office hours, looking for peers to help me with guidance as well. I never believed I was the smartest in the room. I was always asking questions and trying to make sure that everything I did was intentional. There wasn't a class I was taking I didn't need to be taking. There wasn't time I was wasting studying a topic that didn't need studying. Everything was very intentional. Work smarter, not harder. I think I made a wise decision for my overall future by trying so hard to finish in as little time as possible. But it's not for everybody. Some people enjoy the high school experience and whatnot. Me personally, I just wanted to move on with my life. I had my group of friends outside of the high school, and we remain close to this day. I didn't need school for that. I just needed school for my credentials. And nobody can take those away. I'm studying for my MCAT currently, which I'm going to take in July, and I plan to work in internal medicine, hopefully, if I get matched to that. That's a long ways away. My ideal goal is to get into medical school, preferably close to home. I live in Georgia. And in Georgia, we have the Hope Scholarship for any Georgia high school graduate, which takes off like 90% of the tuition. Then all you have to pay is the fees. It is insanely affordable to take your kids to college in this state. The only issue is Atlanta traffic, so make sure you teach your kids how to drive well. Obviously in any case, but especially if they're going to be going to college a little bit far from your house, or even if they're going to move out. College is where there is a lot of kids that just learned how to drive are, and so the rates of accident go up a lot. So be careful. I believe other states have similar types of scholarships because usually a state will favor its residents. So it's best to stay in-state if you can help it. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to be talking about is purpose. We'll get into planning later, but first and foremost, and the most important thing, is purpose. So, why do you want to be a physician? Remember that you need to do what you love, because it's your life and it's your job that you're going to be going to every day, every hour, for the rest of your life. Medicine is a long road, and you need to be sure of it through your own introspection. Being sure of the career you want puts you at an advantage to achieve it a lot faster. And keep in mind, residency bias and state bias for in-state applicants when applying to schools, so you don't waste your time. Do not become a doctor for the money. There are so many easier ways to do that. Becoming a doctor has to be your passion. If it's not your passion, do something else. Do something that you love. Don't do something you are not going to love for the rest of your life, especially when it's such a long road like this. It will end in regret. Okay, so let's say you've listened to everything I say and you're just sure about medicine. Then let's move on to something also purpose aligned, but getting into a little bit of planning. And that is your personal statement. It's never too early to be writing your personal statement. Of course, you're going to have probably more experiences as you get closer to your application date, but overall, you should have an idea of it, maybe even a rough draft. Medical school applications open May 1st. The closer you can submit your application to when they first open, the more likely you're going to get into medical school. It is a rolling first come, first serve basis type of application, not a rolling application. So the earlier in the cycle, the better it is for you. A lot of the times, some don't even recommend applying past May. I think, apply when it first opens. You can take your MCAT later. As long as you have everything down to apply, there's no reason not to. So yes, open May 1st. Ideally, you should try to apply in your junior year. You do not need to have all of your prerequisites done to apply. You just need to make sure that you have them done before you would start med school, which is a year from the date that you apply, essentially. The August upcoming, the next one. So not the August when you apply, but the one after. So essentially a year. Okay, let's get into it. Let's talk about how you write your personal statement in the upcoming slides. Another note, you need to retrieve recommendation letters for medical school. So throughout your college career, ideally while you're still close with the professor or whoever you're working for, you should develop a relationship with your advisor and with these other people and have them send their recommendation letters to your advisor, because you are not legally allowed to be reading it. I highly recommend a committee letter, because a committee letter is when your advisor can essentially help you decide which letters to keep. They'll tell you which ones are good or not. They're not going to tell you what's in them, but they will make it the best looking, and they'll summarize the most important points, which brevity is key. As much as you might want to send in multiple different letters, not all applications or application committees are actually going to read everything. A lot of them prefer brevity. So if it's brief but it's good, you're more likely to get in the door, which is why I would recommend a committee letter. You should ideally get letters from different doctors of different specialties. That's not always possible, but you should try your best, get involved with your community. You should get it from doctors who you've shadowed, doctors you've maybe worked for as a medical assistant or a medical scribe. You should get it from professors, STEM or otherwise, mainly STEM, but maybe one non-STEM. And every school is going to have its own preferences, but in general, this is what is recommended. So I would recommend to get as many letters as you can. And then later on, you can decide which ones to keep or not. You don't have to keep them all. As promised, let's get into some personal statement tips. First of all, I highly recommend getting out there as soon as you can so you can develop real-world experience, which will help you decide if you want to be a physician or not. Anyways, it's going to help you develop your purpose whether or not you already have one. It will help develop it. And admission committees are human, and they want to see that development. They want to see stories and connections and moments that you realize this is for you, and maybe moments where you realize it's not. And in that case, you just saved yourself a lot of time. So the next thing, I recommend reaching out to your local community, your masjid, your school, anything really. Just try to reach out as much as you can, maybe even your local doctor. Try to shadow physicians, ideally of different specialties, maybe 2 or 3. Make sure you're volunteering like at least once a week and early on. You don't want to start volunteering just a year before you submit your application. You want to be volunteering maybe even a few years before, but consistently. Consistency is key. And then you can get really good letters from people you develop good connections with. So just be sure to kind of put yourself out there and be social. I know it's kind of hard. There's a lot of things that you're juggling. But this is very, very key. That's almost more than anything else. Make sure you're developing connections and you're staying involved in your community. And what I would also recommend is that while you are doing these volunteering things, if anything sticks out to you, if you don't have time to even write it down, you're in the middle of something, just record yourself and say what just happened, how it connected to you, because you're not going to remember. You'll be like, oh, I don't remember. You won't, most of the time, especially if you do it enough. There's going to be a lot of moments, and then you'll just have so many things to choose from when it is time to write your statement or describe your activities. And your personal statement should include personal details. So I know I'm saying it a lot, but the committees are human. They want to see your humanity. They want to feel a connection with you. This includes sections of the application where you describe your activities. Make sure you don't use real patient names because of HIPAA. But otherwise, I would also recommend getting your paper reviewed, your personal statement. Make sure you are within the word limit of AAMC, because there is a word limit, character limit. But make sure you get your paper reviewed by somebody who can actually have the credentials to review it, whether that's a former committee member, current physician. If you don't have anybody, then I would recommend having it reviewed online. You can pay for somebody to review it who is certified too, basically, in this field. So the personal statement formula, let's get into it. So essentially, there's going to be an intro. You need to have a little story and a takeaway. Paragraph 2 has a story and a takeaway. Maybe even a continuation of the intro story, but you get more into it. You can add maybe 2 stories, but don't overdo it. You want to kind of focus on one thing. You don't want to be trauma dumping. So just story, takeaway, and then the conclusion includes what you hope to achieve as future physician, why you want to do that. Have it reviewed by someone, as I've said. That's important. Don't just write it and be okay. Not just for grammatical issues. Like, there are certain things you should put on there and things you shouldn't. It should not just be like your life story or something like that. Maybe a little part of it. It has to be relevant, and it's best to get it looked at by a professional. Don't take anything for a chance. Okay, so let's get into an example so you can really see what I'm trying to talk about. So in this example, this is a excerpt of a personal statement from China. So that's her name, China. From 2022, she got into 5 medical schools, including an Ivy League and a top 10. And the topic is about her family having health issues and being in the hospital. So let's get into it. The aroma of fresh Vietnamese food filled the dark hospital room as I creaked open the styrofoam takeout box and placed it on my grandpa's bedside. With all of the wires connected to him, it looked like a puppeteer was controlling him to sit up in bed. The silence between us could be cut through with a knife, and eventually the metronomic rhythm of his heart rate monitor lulled me to sleep. Although I had spent much time at my grandpa's house as a child, I felt that I was never given a chance to connect with him. Sitting in the silent hospital room with him at the age of 8, I thought I would never have a second chance to do so. However, when I returned to my grandpa's house weeks later, I saw a changed man. As we sat in front of the TV and cheered on his favorite basketball team, I finally felt that connection I was yearning for from him, the connection between friends. I did not understand what the doctors had done to my grandpa when he underwent surgery, but I knew the snake-like scar down his chest gave him a look of power and positivity that he had never expressed before. My desire to become a physician slowly started to burn as I knew that I wanted to cure people both physically and emotionally, just as the doctors done for my grandpa. That last line is very powerful. You need powerful lines like that. This is like a Hollywood-esque story, and it's very touching to the heart. That is what committees like to see. Another thing to keep in mind, schools don't want you to trauma dump. I'm reiterating this, but it's important. You can't just put all of the bad things that have happened to you on the paper and just expect the school to admit you. You can't scare them off either. You have to be very purposeful with this. It's your purpose. So just be kind of specific in the details about that one topic. Be specific with one topic, maybe two, but don't get into all of the traumatic details, like blood and gore. Maybe a little, but not too much. Just like she has. She touched on her issues beautifully. That's what you're aiming to do. Humanity unites us when it comes to aiding each other in ill health, and the committees, they have humanity. So this is maybe a topic that you would want to aim for. Even when a murderer is choking, we rush to their aid regardless. That's what we're supposed to do as doctors. So if you can exemplify those traits, that's an innate human response from deep within to help each other and keep each other alive, that's important. As I said, my love language is acts of service, and I plan to do this with my own statement. Expressing gratitude for what medicine can do or has done for you is also a good frame. It's also important to critique some aspects because, of course, our system could definitely be better. But overall, medicine has a lot of advancements, and that is why a lot of us are even alive. That's why we still have our grandparents, and it's important to show that you admire that, because that's what you're trying to become, correct? So this personal statement shows humanity, how conversations and connections and experiences will motivate you to be a physician. That is the key premise. That's what you're trying to show. Okay, so we're going to talk about something that's a little bit of a touchy subject, but it needs to be talked about. So, financial planning. Now that we have mostly discussed purpose, we need to get more into strategy and planning. And, one of those topics is financial planning. So most of the states have affordable college as well as dual enrollment options as long as the student attends the state's high school or graduates from an in-state resident, things like that. But medical school is always going to be expensive, except for the exception of a few schools with free tuition. Most of them are expensive. And with Trump's new big beautiful bill, federal loans are limited. So his new big beautiful bill is a reason a lot of students are not even pursuing medicine anymore. But we can change that with some planning. So the big beautiful bill, it limits the federal loans you can take out to $200,000 for the Grad Plus loan. After that, you have to take private loans. And I would recommend never, ever, ever, ever doing that. Private loans have an insane interest rate. You can essentially be indebted for life once you take those. You might not feel like it because it's not really explained to you when you take it because they want suckers to take those. But it can really, really mess up your life. I would not recommend that. Instead, you're going to be planning and saving. There might be a future where schools lower their tuitions because of the Grad Plus loan not being available anymore and it being capped at $200,000. But until then, and we're not sure if that will happen, you just need to plan a little better. Okay, to be on the safe side, let's just do some planning. There's a few options like additional schooling to get ultrasound tech certification, medical assistant certification, medical scribe, EMT, all those kind of things, just so you can make some money until you start med school. Because a lot of people take a gap year anyway to focus on the MCAT after graduating. So during that time, after you apply and you're studying for your MCAT, you're going to have a year. During that time, it's the time to be working. Ideally, you're going to be working during college too, but that can be very hard. So it can be very hard to actually make any significant amount of money from that, even if you are working just for the sake of having work experience in the medical field. You're going to not be able to do it so much because you're a student, and most places want full-time workers. So let's talk about how you're going to make money. So you can do the certifications, but I honestly wouldn't recommend it. Some people will recommend it because you can maybe make a little bit more money, but in some cases, you're not. I was working as a medical assistant for a year. I didn't need a certification. I applied to many jobs so I could get a job that wouldn't need a certification. I didn't want to go to extra school, pay for extra school, spend extra time just to make not enough. I could make more money at different jobs I don't need even a certification for. But just to be in the medical field, I was applying for those, and I eventually got one. So it is possible, and it's what I would recommend trying. If you can't manage to get a medical field job, honestly, I would recommend getting a non-medical field job and volunteering until you can find a medical field job. Some cases, maybe a few jobs. You need to be saving as much as you can in this gap year. Ideally, $100K, but that is steep. $50K minimum would be very good. So that's my opinion, but of course, do any certifications that you feel you need to. Obviously look into it, look at the salary and the schooling. Different places have different amounts of schooling for them. Definitely look at your own ultrasound tech schooling, medical assistant schooling, needed for your state. And saving up is definitely very important. I would highly recommend that, but on top of that, apply for any scholarships or grants that you can, of course. Talk to your school's financial departments, and try to get into the medical schools that have the free tuition. I know that's hard. You still have to pay for a living there, so still save, but just do anything you can. And as a last resort, there is a school in the Caribbean, Grenada. It's a MD school, US certified. People can get in there with a fairly low MCAT score. So it is popular, and they have a rolling admissions, which means that when you apply, you can get in the next month, and they have multiple entrance points. Basically. Essentially. Their tuition is about $350K. That doesn't include living. So I honestly would not recommend this unless it's your last resort, because their residency match rates are not very good, and that will leave you stuck potentially with a career that you don't like. You might have to do psychiatry if you don't. You might have to do a field that you don't like just because you can't match with this school. So I would say one of the most important things besides tuition for a school is their match rate. Make sure their match rate is good, and that's something people don't think about. Okay, so let's talk about the MCAT. Yeah, the MCAT. The most daunting test ever, determines your entrance to med school. Of course, there's going to be more tests once you're in med school, step 1, step 2, your board tests afterwards, things like that. But the MCAT's your first step, basically. even though it feels like a big mountain at the end. It's your first step, and you can never start studying for it too early, even if you haven't taken the classes yet, okay? Just study for it as soon as you can. Obviously, it might be better to study for it right before the test because it'll be fresh in your head. But, study like as soon as I tell you how to start studying, and then study again whenever you're about to take it. Study for it, take it, and maybe if you don't do well, take it again. Taking it early can't hurt you unless you're not ready for it. If you feel ready for it, then take it. And then if you don't do well, take it again. You can take it again. You have about 7 tries in your lifetime. So just study well, take it when you're ready. Try to take it by May 1st because that is when the applications open for med school. Or sorry, try to take it by April, like beginning of April, because they're going to take about a month to grade it. And then applications open in May. So if you could just submit your whole application with your MCAT score, that would be ideal. However, you can submit your application without your MCAT score. And you should. Don't wait on that if you're still studying, because it's first come, first serve. As soon as you get it, obviously you'll enter it in. As long as you take your MCAT before the cycle ends in like September, you should be okay. Different schools have different deadlines though, so don't quote me. Some schools like will end in August, but ideally, you want to apply in May. You want to have it scored by May. That is the best case scenario. Every time you get further from that, less likely you'll get into the school. So, as we've talked about, you should apply to a school with a good residency match rate. And something people don't often consider is that there's ACOM and then AMCAS and WMC. So WMC is for MD schools. It's gonna, it's one application and then you can send it to like many MD schools. And then, except for some exceptions like Texas Tech or Texas Med School, that one you need to do a whole separate thing. So there's some nuances like that, but overall, that's the rule. And then ACOM, that's for DO schools. It's a separate one. So, I would recommend doing both. Apply to DO schools, apply to MD schools, apply to as many schools as you think will accept you. Obviously, within reason, look at their, their bias towards their in-state residents. Look at their tuition. Look at their stats if you match them. And if you do, or if you're just falling short by a little bit, then apply to that school. Make sure you save up. Applications can really add up. So let's talk about strategy for the studying though. So you don't need to break the bank to study for the MCAT. You're going to have to spend a little bit, but you don't need to break the bank. So what I recommend, don't buy the classic Kaplan books that everybody buys. Okay? You're not going to use them. Maybe you will, but I don't recommend it. If you're so adamant about it, get last year's copy, or even the year before that. Like, the past 5 years are going to be pretty much similar. So there's not really a reason to get this year's. It's just going to be a lot more expensive for no reason. Okay, but what I recommend, you should get a Chad's Prep subscription. He puts all of the lectures and he puts outlines for you. Take notes just on the outline. You don't need to write everything he says. He gives you strategies for how to not use your calculator, gives you formulas, everything. I recommend making your own formula sheet always, but he gives you some of those things. And I would highly recommend that for the biochem, biology, physics, chemistry, and organic chemistry. So basically all of the really hard things, important things, the STEM. And then the other thing for content is the PsychSoc, Khan Academy PDF. So that can be found on Reddit. And then also, as you're doing the Chad's Prep, you need to simultaneously be doing the Anki cards so you don't forget what you just learned. and that can be you can get that from Reddit as well. It's called the Milestone Anki card deck. Every time you complete a topic, go do that topic in Anki. Repeat your cards every day. Every day. Do not miss a day. You should be studying every day from 9 to 5 minimum. Especially if you're trying to do this in about 4 months, which it's achievable. It is achievable. Some people even prefer that so they can like remember everything for the test. But, you know, if you're going to spread it out, still be consistent. If you just study, and then you stop, and then you start studying again, you're going to forget. Be consistent every day. Your brain is a muscle. So yeah, I recommend those things for sure. Chad's Prep, Anki, Khan Academy for that PDF, specifically for PsychSoc. And that's for the content review. Once you finish content review, it should take max 2 months. Okay? Don't do it for that long. Then you need to buy UWorld. Okay? You need to do their questions every day. Do their questions. Add to your formula sheet based off the questions. Okay? Get used to their question format. Memorize your amino acids first thing. Memorize your amino acids. Memorize your formula sheet. Write it down every day. And if you're having trouble memorizing your amino acids, you can download Amino Acid Quiz. And it's basically like a little game, and you can memorize those. And then, after you do UWorld, or maybe even during, do weekly, bi-weekly, occasionally, MCAT practice tests. You can get this from WMC, AMCAS, but definitely do those. And, you know, replicate the test conditions. So just your computer, you know, lock your door, no interaction with another human, don't talk for that whole time, take the breaks that they give you, only to use the bathroom, or, you know, drink water, don't use your phone. Then also, don't use your calculator. You know, a lot of people don't know that, but you don't get a calculator on this test. Do not use that. That's what I recommend that for sure. And let me just emphasize, please sign up for the MCAT the day sign-ups open. Okay, because if you don't do that, a lot of time your spot's just gonna get taken. At least the good ones. The ones like beginning April. It's just gonna get taken, and then like you might have to go to a different state to even take your test, which is not fun. You know, you don't want to be so stressed out before your test. Sometimes you might not even have option, and you might not have an option, and you might have to delay it. So that you don't want that to be the reason your test is delayed. Okay, it's better to sign up for it on your ideal date that you're gonna take it when you're ready. And you can always reschedule. Don't cancel it, because it'll count as a attempt, even if you didn't show up, but delay it. I know that from experience. So let's talk about test day. Test day, so nerve-wracking. So for test day, the week before your MCAT, keep your sleep schedule the same. You know, wake up at 7 a.m., because usually tests are at 8, you know, maybe 6 a.m., depending how far you live from the test site. Sleep on time, eat on time, eat foods that don't upset your stomach, you know, doing your practice tests, like, eat the same things that you might eat while you're in your little breaks from your test. Eat well before you go there, sleep well, have a good breakfast, nutritious. You don't want that to be the reason you fail. You know, make sure you have your amino acids memorized, your formula sheets. You should be done with practicing the week before your test. You need to like just chill, just make sure you memorize those things, because those are key to like everything else. But apart from that, you don't need to be practice testing. If anything, you need to calm your mind down, because you don't want to be on overload when you start your test, to the point that like you're reading and you're just like, you just can't. So just take a little break. You know, if you don't have a week spare, just like a day, 2 days, just really try to get into it. So I'm gonna try to tell you what happens also. So when you get there, they're gonna have a little locker for you, put your things, and then they're gonna want to see an ID, a school ID probably as well. You can bring a pencil because I don't know if some places are still doing paper tests, so you can definitely bring a number 2 pencil, or maybe just for the scratch paper that they're gonna give you. You can have like your number 2 pencil. Some places just give it to you, but bring it if you want. Don't bring your calculator, you're not gonna be able to use it. If you bring it, you're just gonna have to put it in your locker. Bring snacks. Don't bring snacks that are sticky, messy, gonna make you upset in your stomach. And bring water and stay hydrated, be caffeinated, everything that you need. Don't miss anything on this day. Okay, let's talk about interviews. So interviews are basically the last step, almost. So if you are accepted, then they're gonna ask you for, or not accepted, but they're gonna accept you for the interview section. Then you're gonna progress, and you're basically gonna talk to someone who's gonna interview you. It's gonna be a little bit scary. So you know what you should do? You should talk to someone who's already been accepted. You should practice. Don't assume you're gonna be okay without prep. Okay, interviews are not just like a normal conversation. It's an interview. They're gonna be analyzing your every move. Okay, so you need to have your why down. Okay, don't stutter on that. And then another typical question is, what's your biggest strength or weakness and why? So be sure to not sound pretentious when you answer it. Don't just say, oh, my biggest weakness is like that I'm so great, or don't do that. Have to have actual weakness. Dress the part, be respectful, prepare. I recommend reading the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, because you are going to an interview. It's by Dale Carnegie. Be sure to have your secondaries also reviewed, not just your personal statement. And that's the thing that you write like after your interview. Now they assess that, and they probably see if they want to interview again. That's how the process goes. So if you don't have anyone in mind, you can always pay someone to review it, and I highly recommend that. Be able to talk about the main topics that you learned in school, memories, connections, anything that you mentioned in your application, by the way, is fair game for them to bring up in the interview. So you should be prepared to talk about, everything that you've learned at a deeper level, but also be prepared that they might ask you some kind of personal things you don't want to get into. But if you mention something, your personal statement, they can talk about it in the interview. And that includes things that are kind of discriminatory, which is something to watch out for, because, they're allowed to ask you what you put in your statement. So like an example, some schools, allegedly are discriminatory towards pregnant women. They're less likely to accept them because they think they might drop out, might not be as good of a student, might not graduate, things like that. They're obviously not allowed to discriminate you for it, but they are allowed to ask you about it if you mention in your personal statement as to why you want to be a doctor. Oh, like for my daughter, like I want her to like also, not the main reason, I want her to be inspired by me or something. They can ask you, oh, like say that you're pregnant. They can ask you about it. They can be like, oh, like how are you gonna, deal with school, be pregnant. If you don't want them to be able to ask you about that at all, don't mention it in your personal statement. Okay, let's get more into strategy and planning. So if you haven't noticed, I'm kind of working backwards. So I'm starting with like the application process for med school, and then I'm talking about like different aspects of that. Later I'm talking about like classes for college, and then I'll get into high school and dual enrollment. So right now I'm also going to mention volunteering. Again, that's also super important. You should do that as early as you can. Your recommendation letters, your advisors, make sure you have a good relationship. Okay, let's get into the rest of it. So prerequisites for most medical schools are in this PDF, which I linked below. It can be Googled, but it's right there. And it's the typical requirements are on the slide. But, each school obviously has certain requirements. So if there's any schools you're targeting specifically, look at it on this PDF. And keep in mind, you can submit your application before all your required classes are done, as long as your required classes are done before you start med school. Okay, so usually the prereqs are like mathematics for calculus, and then psychology, English 2 semesters, general chem 2 semesters, biology 2 semesters, both of those with lab, organic chemistry 2 semesters with lab, biochem with lab also, usually. That can vary too. So the strategy here is to just pick a degree that hits most of the prerequisites for medical school already, or that's the strategy I used. Biology major hits those, okay? And not saying that you get a biology major just to get into med school, by the way. Biology major also hits a lot of them for like PA school, or even possibly when you graduate from your biology major, you can go and like get a BSN and become a nurse in 1 year right after your biology major, which is why I recommend a biology major, because you can like go so many different paths with your biology major. So if you're not sure about something, go with a biology major. So it is a little bit harder because you have a lot more harder classes, like not just the prereqs. There's a lot of other advanced biology classes too, but that's also just in prep of med school. So I would recommend biology for that route a lot more as well. I recommend that. You would have to take less classes because your prereqs are just what you need for your major, essentially. And then a different strategy some people take is to do an easier major, kind of similar like psychology, and then also to take the prereqs for medical school. I don't recommend this because, prereqs for med school usually have other prereqs for those classes, and it just becomes a lot more work than necessary. You're just taking extra classes to like achieve your goal, which is fine if you just want to like really focus on the important classes that are prereqs and your grades in those, and just have an easier grade in your other classes like your psychology major. However, that's just not the route I went, but you have to do what's right for you. So I'm gonna first talk about my college path. If you're confused about what the codes mean, then just look at the GSU site for like the specific name of a course, if there's any confusion. So this is just an example of like a route that you could possibly take. This is the route that I took just for my college. I took summer semesters, as you can see. I tried my best. So this is not including dual enrollment, but let's start from freshman year. So fall 2022, there's English, history, math, philosophy, basics. Spring, so Gen Chem and the lab. English 2, pre-calc, and then world religions. Summer 2023, intro to bio, and the lab, and then Gen Chem 2 with the lab, and then there's sociology and theater. So fall 2023, there's biology 2, the lab, physics with the lab, psych 2103, psych 2107. Those are just some deeper psych courses. Spring 2024, I think that was molecular cell bio, and then that had a lab class as well. That was 3810. And then there is Orgo lab in there, which is counted as it's a completely separate class. So lab. CNHP is like a medical terminology class, and then SCOM is like human communication. Okay. Summer 2024, I took animal bio, I believe. Yeah, animal bio and an upper biology class. They get more specific, so it's probably like immunology or something like that. And then chemistry, probably Orgo 2 right there, or the lab. And then fall 2024, I take some more biology classes. Maybe genetics is in there. Just all of the biology, microbio, all the biology classes. And then I took statistics, physics 2, continue taking more biology classes, of course, that's the major, and then I think that was Orgo Lab right in there, another psych class. And then lastly, I took an animal bio lab in my last semester, as well as a research class, which is what you should aim for before you graduate, biochem, 2 psych classes as well. And that's how I finished it off, with a 3.73 GPA. Thank God. Okay, so lastly, I'm going to talk about high school. It kind of seeps into middle school because you can kind of start this from middle school, by the way. But let's talk about the strategy, because as soon as you know that, you can apply that to basically any year that you're in school. So what you should take into consideration, something not a lot of people know, is that a lot of schools have requirements, like for dual enrollment, like applications, deadlines, limitations, like which grade level that you're in. Sometimes you can only take maybe 2 or 3 dual enrollment classes based off your grade level, things like that. But whatever your limitations are, you should always try to reach your maximum potential within the school that you're in. So the schools that have the limitations for their grade levels for dual enrollment, what I would recommend there, because you could save a lot of time, is your school that you're enrolled in for maybe your state school, your main high school, you should stay enrolled in that. I don't recommend like disenrolling. If anything, you should stay in that. Maybe do like some online high school classes or shift to online, but stay enrolled in that. And then also get permission from your guidance counselor, because otherwise it does not count. But also enroll in a private online high school if you can afford it, because you can take classes at your own pace there, which means in addition to your regular load, you're going to take another classes. So for example, let's say I'm in high school and I'm taking first semester freshman year, I don't know, English, algebra, econ, history, stuff like that. So what you could do in that case is, since you're too young to do actual dual enrollment, just to get your high school stuff done, you can see, what do I need second semester of school, or in the next years, and what can I do right now. So obviously if you're taking English 1, you can't take English 2 simultaneously, but what you could do is the summer that you graduate, you could take English 2, you could take whatever comes after algebra, like geometry, and then that can help you basically skip a year in a summer, because you can take as soon as those classes finish the next step. But for classes that aren't like that, for example econ, a lot of classes like that are half a semester in high school. So for classes like that, when you have to take a different class in the next semester, like political science, you could go ahead and just take that in the online high school. And if you are old enough, 11th grade, 10th grade, for a lot of schools, start dual enrollment, even better, when you're doing a dual enrollment college instead of a high school, you can get credit for both. So college and high school. So I would obviously recommend dual enrollment over AP classes, because dual enrollment, you're taking your grade from the entire school year, just like a normal college class, and you don't have to rely on like the AP test at the end of the year to determine whether or not you get college credit. Because a lot of time you'll do well in the AP class and you're still not get college credit because the AP test is it's like standardized-ish. It's kind of hard. So I would recommend just doing dual enrollment, and that way you get credit for both. And most schools would accept dual enrollment over AP. But keep in mind, try to take in-person science classes, even though it's not convenient, just because med school would prefer that, a lot of them. So when you're doing these kind of dual enrollment things, keep that in mind. And keep in mind, you can mix and match, right? So you could do online with your public high school, your state school that you're just normally going to, and you could also just do online like community college dual enrollment. You could do that, and then if you're not old enough, you could do online normal high school, online additional high school, until you're ready for dual enrollment college. You could stay in person at your high school, do online college. You could go to your college in person and do online high school, or you could do a mix of both. You could take some in-person high school classes and some online. Same for the college. As long as you just get your permission from your guidance counselor, everything, all the paperwork, there is a lot. Permission from your parents, and all those kind of things, you should be set. So that's what I did, right? Starting in about 7th grade, I was doing Liberty University Online Academy full time. And that basically allowed me to do 7th grade, 8th grade pretty quick. And honestly, that was fine. If anything, I think that's totally fine to do that. You don't really need to learn a whole lot in those grades. But maybe later on, like when you're getting to like actual high school classes, if your kids are not so motivated to kind of learn everything on their own, probably in person is a little bit better, but if they're just doing online in high school, there's just a higher chance that once they take college classes, they're not going to be able to handle. But if your kid is strong-willed and like they can, it's okay, because college classes do start from the beginning at an accelerated pace, but they do start from the beginning. So there's just a lot of things, a lot of varying factors. Do what's right for you. But, I'm just going to mention, you can take summer classes, like between when you graduate high school and your first year of college. You can take summer classes in high school. You can take classes in addition to what you're already taking in high school to get ahead, even simultaneously. Just look at the graduation requirements of your high school. Look at the requirements also for the college you want to get into, and the requirements for that major to graduate with that. Try to make them align so you can get as many dual credits as you can. Dual enrollment is also I think free for the first 30 credits, which is, helpful. Make sure you're applying to scholarships simultaneously in your senior year, which might come sooner than you expect, because you might just be able to skip a grade, which also you need a separate permission for that, obviously from your school, your parents, and everything else. But that is the best way to just skip through high school. In my opinion, you don't have to take it, but I don't think high school is so important. I think they're very easy classes, and college is obviously harder, but I think college is almost the level of high school that you're supposed to have. It's basically high school repeated for those first 2 years of college. So you don't want to have 6 years of just redundancy. So in my opinion, just try to get through high school as quick as you can, get your credits, get your good grades, get to college, and try to retain information. Try to learn, truly learn, not just get through it. Okay? That's what I recommend. I think we got through the first couple things. Yeah. So what I did personally for the dual enrollment route, I don't have my high school transcript anymore. It's from about 4 years ago. But what I did was essentially, right, I did Liberty University Online Academy full time until I basically did 7th grade and 8th grade like in one semester, basically. So then when I was in my freshman year of high school on paper, right? Like I was supposed to be in probably 8th grade, right? So I did that also probably in like one semester. Same thing for no, that was it. And then I enrolled in like a state online school whenever COVID hit, right? For 10th grade, which was supposed to be my like end of 8th grade, beginning. And then when I was in that, I also was simultaneously in Liberty University Online Academy online. So that allowed me to get to 11th grade when I was supposed to be in 9th. And then whenever I got to Georgia, right? I did a Georgia high school because I wanted to go to Georgia College, have a good tuition with the Hope Scholarship, try to graduate from the high school of your state that you want to go to college into. You're going to have more benefits. Okay? So when I got to Georgia, they compared what I've done to their graduation requirements, which is what I should have done from the beginning. I didn't know I'd graduate from that high school, right? And then they saw like I could technically just be considered a senior because of all the credits that I had. So I was considered a senior, and then because I was a senior, I could do dual enrollment. So I did dual enrollment, and what I took was Math 101. I took psychology, and then the next semester I took econ and political science. And these classes counted for both my high school and college graduation requirements, so nothing was wasted. I took it kind of easy because it was my first kind of college classes, but now I would probably recommend, taking a college English class as soon as you can, taking, college algebra, because those kind of things are, like college algebra is going to be a prereq for maybe chemistry. Chemistry is like maybe a prereq for bio or a co-req. Those are all those prereqs for med school. Sooner you can get them done, sooner you can apply to med school, sooner you can finish, right? Everything adds up. So just another note, even in high school, you should start clinical and non-clinical volunteering as early as possible. You don't want to just start volunteering whenever you're applying for school. I've mentioned this. I know it's redundant. It's important. You already know what I recommend about the jobs. What I did personally, by the way, I volunteered at a hospital in the NICU, and I'm gonna also, probably this month, start volunteering for hospice. And I've also, for the non-clinical volunteering, I have volunteered at a daycare, so that is just non-clinical, and I've worked for a year as a medical assistant with no certification. They just on-the-job trained me. I was very blessed. I was able to, apply to so many, and I got that one. It doesn't have to be that hard, There are easier certifications to receive. I think medical scribe probably one of them. So yeah, but definitely don't. There's multiple ways to study for your certifications, right? So don't just go to some medical assistant school for 2 years when there's a 6-month program somewhere. Just research about it for sure. Okay, things like that exist. And then what else? So I worked for a year as a medical assistant. And if you wish to be certified in something medical related, to have more success with your job applications, please do. Don't let me stop you. just make sure your bang is worth your buck. Make sure you're making at least what you paid to get your certification in the first place. Make sure you're not spending too much time doing that, because that's not your ultimate goal. That's just your side job, okay, until you get to your real one. So that's something to keep in mind. Always, consider pros and cons of everything. And try to save up for medical school in your gap year. That's all I can really say. We're almost done. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this helpful. Good luck to all of you. Going to medical school or otherwise. Thanks for listening to my story too. I'm glad I got to share it. There's definitely some things I would have done differently, like when I studied for the MCAT. If you can, do in your junior year, take it then. So basically start studying in the middle of your sophomore year. Yeah, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much.